In a quiet suburban neighborhood in Georgia, life moved at a steady pace. The streets were lined with modest homes, their lawns neatly trimmed and flower beds bursting with color. It was the kind of place where neighbors waved hello, kids rode bikes down the sidewalks, and everyone seemed to know each other's names. But for Maya Johnson, this peaceful setting masked the daily struggles she faced as a single mother trying to make ends meet. Maya lived in a small house on the edge of town with her son Elijah, who was 7 years old and full of curiosity about the world. He had his mother's warm smile and an infectious laugh that could light up even the gloomiest days. Despite her hardships, Maya poured all her energy into giving Elijah the best life possible. She worked tirelessly, 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to ensure they always had food on the table and clothes on their backs. During the day, she cleaned offices, scrubbing floors and dusting desks until her hands ached. At night, she served drinks at a local bar, earning tips from customers who rarely noticed how exhausted she looked behind her polite demeanor. Her journey hadn't been easy. A few years earlier, Maya had left an abusive relationship, determined to protect herself and her son from further harm. Leaving meant starting over with nothing but a suitcase of clothes and a fierce determination to build a better future. Her family, though distant, supported her in their own way. Her father, General Marcus Iron Fist Thompson, had offered to help financially, but Maya refused. She wanted to prove to herself and to Elijah that she could stand on her own. 2 feet. Still, she often thought about her dad, whose strength and wisdom had shaped so much of her life. On this particular evening, Maya was driving home after a long shift at the bar. The car's headlights illuminated the dark road ahead as she navigated the familiar route. Her mind wandered between thoughts of Elijah, who would be asleep by now, and the bills piling up on her kitchen counter. She sighed deeply, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Life wasn't easy, but she reminded herself that every challenge brought her closer to stability, for both her and her son. Unbeknownst to Maya, trouble was brewing just around the corner. As she approached a stop sign, she slowed down carefully before proceeding through the intersection. Suddenly, red and blue lights flashed in her rearview mirror. Her heart sank as she pulled over, wondering what she could have possibly done wrong. She rolled down her window and waited nervously as one of the officers approached her car. "License and registration, please," the officer said curtly, shining a flashlight into her face. Maya complied, handing over the requested documents, while explaining that she didn't believe she'd broken any traffic laws. The officer barely glanced at the papers before launching into a series of increasingly aggressive questions. His tone shifted from professional to accusatory, implying that she might be hiding something illegal in her vehicle. Maya felt a knot form in her stomach. She knew this wasn't a routine traffic stop. It was something more sinister. The officer's partner joined them, leaning against the doorframe of her car with a smirk. Together, they peppered her with baseless accusations, questioning why she was out so late and whether she had anything to hide. Their words carried undertones of prejudice, thinly veiled insults that made her blood boil. Despite her growing fear, Maya refused to let them push her around. She remained calm and collected, asserting her rights firmly. When they demanded to search her car, she shook her head and explained that they needed a warrant. This response only seemed to anger them further. One of the officers raised his voice, threatening to arrest her if she continued to resist. Maya's hands trembled slightly, but she held her ground. She couldn't afford to let them bully her. Not tonight, not ever. As the confrontation escalated, Maya's thoughts turned to Elijah. What would happen to him if she were taken away? Who would take care of him? Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed it aside, focusing instead on finding a way out of this nightmare. She reached for her phone, knowing she needed backup. But not just anyone. There was only one person who could truly help her now: her father. General Marcus Thompson wasn't just any man. To those who knew him, he was a living legend, a retired Delta Force commander whose name commanded respect across the globe. Known for his unyielding discipline and tactical genius, Marcus had spent decades leading some of the most dangerous missions in modern history. Even in retirement, his reputation preceded him, striking fear into anyone foolish enough to cross him or his loved ones. Maya dialed her father's number, her fingers trembling as she pressed the buttons. When he answered, his deep, reassuring voice instantly calmed her racing heart. "Dad, I need you," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of her emotions. Marcus listened intently as she described the situation, his expression darkening with each word. By the time she finished speaking, his jaw was clenched tight, and his eyes burned with fury. "I'm coming," he said simply, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "And when I get there, these men will regret the day they decided to mess with my family." Unknown to the officers standing outside her car, Maya's call set off a chain reaction that would soon spiral far beyond their control. For now, however, they remained oblivious, continuing their tirade as if nothing unusual was happening. Little did they know, help was already on the way, and it came in the form of a man whose very name struck terror into the hearts of his enemies. As Maya hung up the phone, she took a deep breath, feeling a renewed sense of courage. Her father was coming, and with him, justice would follow. Back at home, Elijah sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by his toys. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second stretching longer than the last. He glanced toward the window every few minutes, hoping to see his mom's car pull into the driveway. But as the hours passed and the house grew quieter, worry began to creep in. Where was she? She was never this late without calling. Elijah's thoughts raced. His mom had promised him they'd bake cookies together tonight, a rare treat after such a busy week. Instead, he was left alone with nothing but his imagination and the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. At first, he tried to distract himself by building towers out of blocks, but even that couldn't keep his mind off her absence. Something felt wrong. Deep down, he knew it. Finally, unable to shake the uneasy feeling, Elijah picked up the phone. His small fingers dialed the number he knew by heart, his grandfather's. General Marcus Iron Fist Thompson wasn't just any grandfather. He was a larger-than-life figure who seemed capable of fixing anything. To Elijah, his grandpa, was like a superhero, someone who could solve problems with a single word or glance. And right now, Elijah needed a hero more than ever. The phone rang twice before Marcus answered, his deep voice filling the line. "Hey there, champ," he said warmly, though Elijah could hear the fatigue in his tone. It was late, and Marcus had likely been winding down for the night. But Elijah didn't care about the hour. He needed answers. "Grandpa, Mom isn't home yet," Elijah blurted out, his voice trembling. "She usually calls if she's going to be late, but I haven't heard from her. I'm scared." Marcus immediately sat up straighter, his instincts kicking in. "What do you mean, buddy? Did she say where she was going?" Elijah shook his head even though Marcus couldn't see him. "No, she just went to work like always. But when I called her a little while ago, she sounded really upset. She said she needed you." The last part came out in a whisper, almost as if saying it aloud made the situation feel more real and more terrifying. Marcus's expression hardened. Years of military training had taught him to stay calm under pressure, but hearing the fear in his grandson's voice ignited a fire within him. Maya was his daughter, his only child, and no one messed with his family without facing consequences. Whatever was happening, he would handle it personally. "I'm on my way, Elijah," Marcus said firmly, already grabbing his keys and heading for the door. "Stay strong for me, okay? Your mom is tough, and she's got us both looking out for her. Everything's going to be fine." Though Elijah nodded silently, tears welled up in his eyes. He trusted his grandpa completely, but the uncertainty of the moment weighed heavily on him. After hanging up, he curled up on the couch, clutching a blanket tightly around himself as he waited for Marcus to arrive. Meanwhile, Marcus wasted no time. As he sped toward Georgia, his mind worked methodically, piecing together what little information he had. He called an old friend still active in law enforcement, someone who owed him a favor and might be able to shed light on the situation. "I need you to look into something for me," Marcus said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "A traffic stop involving my daughter, Maya Johnson. Find out everything you can and fast." While waiting for a response, Marcus replayed the conversation with Elijah in his head. Maya sounded upset, scared. That wasn't like her. She was resilient, stubborn even, and she rarely asked for help unless absolutely necessary. For her to reach out in such a state meant whatever was happening was serious. Very serious. As the miles flew by, Marcus's thoughts drifted back to Maya's childhood. She had always been a fighter, determined to prove herself despite the challenges life threw her way. Losing her mother at a young age had forced her to grow up quickly, and Marcus had done his best to fill the void. But raising a daughter alone hadn't been easy, especially given his demanding career. There were times when he regretted not being there more often, but Maya had turned out stronger because of it, or so he liked to believe. Now, as he approached the outskirts of town, Marcus felt a mix of emotions. Anger at whoever dared to threaten, his family, pride in Maya's strength, and a fierce protectiveness that came naturally to him as a father. He clenched the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white against the leather. Whoever these people were, they had no idea what they were dealing with. By the time Marcus reached the area where Maya had been pulled over, news of the incident had started spreading. Bystanders who witnessed the altercation had recorded parts of it on their phones, posting videos online that quickly gained traction. In one clip, Maya could be seen sitting calmly in her car, refusing to give in to the officer's demands. Her composure was remarkable, but the tension in the air was palpable. Another video showed the officers growing increasingly agitated, their body language shifting from professional to hostile. Marcus watched the footage on his phone, his jaw tightening with every passing second. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they painted infuriated him. These men weren't conducting a legitimate investigation. They were harassing his daughter, using their authority as a weapon. And then there was the call Maya had made to him, which undoubtedly rattled them. They probably thought they were untouchable, but they were about to learn otherwise. When Marcus finally arrived at the scene, the atmosphere was electric. News, vans lined the street, their cameras trained on the flashing lights of the patrol cars. Reporters shouted questions at anyone willing to talk, while curious neighbors gathered on sidewalks, whispering among themselves. Amid the chaos, Marcus spotted Maya sitting in the back of one of the police vehicles, her hands cuffed behind her back. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes burned with defiance. Without hesitation, Marcus strode forward, his imposing frame drawing immediate attention. Officers nearby exchanged nervous glances, recognizing him instantly. One of them muttered, "That's General Thompson." The name sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. Even those unfamiliar with his reputation could sense the authority radiating from him. Marcus ignored the commotion, focusing solely on his daughter. When he reached the patrol car, he tapped on the window, catching Maya's gaze. For a brief moment, relief washed over her features, followed by a fresh wave of emotion. Seeing her dad standing there ready to fight for her broke the dam she'd been holding back all night. "Dad," she whispered hoarsely, her voice cracking under the weight of everything she'd endured. "I'm sorry." Marcus placed a hand on the window, his expression softening. "Don't apologize, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong." Turning to the officers, his demeanor shifted entirely. Gone was the gentle father. In his place stood the disciplined commander, his piercing gaze locking onto theirs. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. The officers stammered, caught off guard by his sudden appearance. One of them attempted to explain, stumbling over his words as he recounted the supposed reasons for the traffic stop. But Marcus cut him off sharply. "You harassed my daughter. You disrespected my family. Now you'll answer to me." Behind him, his old friend, the sheriff's deputy, stepped forward, adding weight to Marcus's words. "These officers are under investigation," the deputy announced, addressing the growing crowd. "They'll be taken into custody pending further review." As the officers were led away, protests erupted from the onlookers. Some cheered, while others shouted accusations at the departing patrol cars. Cameras flashed, capturing every moment of the dramatic confrontation. For Marcus, however, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the woman sitting in front of him, finally free from the cuffs that had bound her. Kneeling beside Maya, Marcus wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as she cried. It was a rare display of vulnerability for a man known for his stoic demeanor, but in that moment, he allowed himself to feel everything. The anger, the fear, the overwhelming relief. Maya clung to him, drawing strength from the unwavering support he offered. For Elijah, watching from the sidelines, the sight of his mom reunited with his grandpa brought a flood of emotions. Tears streamed down his face as he ran to them, throwing his arms around both of them. Together, the three of them formed a circle of love and resilience, proof that no matter how hard things got, they would always have each other. And as Marcus looked down at his daughter and grandson, he made a silent vow. No one would ever hurt them again, not on his watch. The moment Maya whispered her father's name into the phone during that tense traffic stop, the officer's demeanor shifted. At first, they didn't seem to grasp the gravity of what she had said. One of them scoffed dismissively, rolling his eyes as if hearing yet another empty threat. But the other officer, a younger man with less confidence, froze mid-sentence, his face paling slightly. He leaned closer to his partner and muttered under his breath, "Wait, did she just say General Thompson? Like, the General Thompson?" The name hung in the air like a thundercloud, heavy and ominous. The older officer hesitated, clearly unsure whether to take the claim seriously. After all, how likely was it that this woman, sitting calmly in her modest sedan on a quiet suburban road, was related to one of the most legendary figures in military history? Still, doubt began to creep in. Both men exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier bravado faltering. Back at home, Elijah clutched the phone tightly after speaking with his grandfather, his heart racing. He trusted Grandpa Marcus completely, but the weight felt unbearable. Every second stretched longer than the last, and the silence in the house was deafening. When he finally heard the distant rumble of a car engine pulling into the driveway, relief washed over him. He ran to the door, throwing it open just as Marcus stepped out of his vehicle. Marcus looked every bit the imposing figure people described him to be. Even in civilian clothes, a simple button-down shirt and slacks, he carried himself with the authority of someone accustomed to commanding respect. His broad shoulders and sharp gaze exuded strength, and though he moved with purpose, there was also a gentleness about him when he saw Elijah waiting anxiously by the door. "Elijah," Marcus said, kneeling down to meet his grandson's eye, level. "You did good calling me. Now tell me everything you know." Elijah recounted the details as best he could, the missed call from Maya, the shaky voicemail, and the fear that something terrible had happened. Marcus listened intently, nodding occasionally as he pieced together the timeline. By the time Elijah finished, Marcus's expression was unreadable, but his clenched fists betrayed the storm brewing inside him. "I'll handle this," Marcus assured Elijah, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Stay here and lock the doors. I'll bring your mom back safe." As Marcus drove toward the location of the traffic stop, his mind raced. He called an old friend still active in law enforcement, someone who owed him more than one favor over the years. "I need you to look into a traffic stop involving my daughter, Maya Johnson," Marcus instructed, his tone leaving no room for hesitation. "Find out who's involved and get me answers now." While waiting for a response, Marcus replayed the situation in his head. Maya was smart, resourceful, and fiercely independent. She wouldn't have called him unless she truly believed she was in danger. That thought alone made his blood boil. Whoever these officers were, they had underestimated not only Maya, but also the wrath of a father protecting his family. By the time Marcus arrived at the scene, the tension was palpable. News vans lined the street, their cameras trained on the flashing lights of patrol cars. Reporters shouted questions at anyone willing to talk, while curious neighbors gathered on sidewalks, whispering among themselves. The sight of such chaos only fueled Marcus's determination. He scanned the area until his eyes landed on Maya, sitting in the back of a police cruiser, her hands cuffed behind her back. Seeing his daughter in that position ignited a fire within him. Maya was no criminal. She was a hard-working single mother trying to provide for her son. And yet here she was, treated like a suspect simply because of the color of her skin and the audacity to assert her rights. It was unacceptable. Without hesitation, Marcus strode forward, his presence immediately drawing attention. Officers nearby exchanged nervous glances, recognizing him instantly. One muttered, "That's General Thompson." The name rippled through the crowd, spreading unease among those who understood its significance. When Marcus reached the patrol car, he tapped firmly on the window, catching Maya's gaze. For a brief moment, relief washed over her tear-streaked face, followed by a fresh wave of emotion. Seeing her dad standing there ready to fight for her, broke through the wall she'd been holding up all night. "Dad?" she whispered hoarsely, her voice cracking under the weight of everything she'd endured. "I'm sorry." Marcus placed a hand on the glass, his expression softening. "Don't apologize, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong." Turning to the officers, his demeanor shifted entirely. Gone was the gentle father. In his place stood the disciplined commander, his piercing gaze locking onto theirs. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. The officers stammered, caught off guard by his sudden appearance. One of them attempted to explain, stumbling over his words as he recounted the supposed reasons for the traffic stop. But Marcus cut him off sharply. "You harassed my daughter. You disrespected my family. Now you'll answer to me." Behind him, his old friend, the sheriff's deputy, stepped forward, adding weight to Marcus's words. "These officers are under investigation," the deputy announced, addressing the growing crowd. "They'll be taken into custody pending further review." As the officers were led away, protests erupted from the onlookers. Some cheered while others shouted accusations at the departing patrol cars. Cameras flashed, capturing every moment of the dramatic confrontation. For Marcus, however, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the woman sitting in front of him, finally free from the cuffs that had bound her. Kneeling beside Maya, Marcus wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as she cried. It was a rare display of vulnerability for a man known for his stoic demeanor, but in that moment, he allowed himself to feel everything: the anger, the fear, the overwhelming relief. Maya clung to him, drawing strength from the unwavering support he offered. For Elijah, watching from the sidelines, the sight of his mom reunited with his grandpa brought a flood of emotions. Tears streamed down his face as he ran to them, throwing his arms around both of them. Together, the three of them formed a circle of love and resilience, proof that no matter how hard things got, they would always have each other. And as Marcus looked down at his daughter and grandson, he made a silent vow: no one would ever hurt them again, not on his watch. By the time Marcus arrived at the scene of the traffic stop, the situation had escalated far beyond a routine police encounter. News vans lined the street, their cameras capturing every detail as reporters shouted questions at anyone willing to speak. Curious neighbors stood on sidewalks, whispering among themselves, while a growing crowd of onlookers gathered, some holding signs in support of Maya, and others simply trying to understand what was happening. The flashing red and blue lights of the patrol cars illuminated the chaos, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Marcus stepped out of his car, his presence immediately commanding attention. Even in plain clothes, he carried himself with the authority of someone accustomed to leading armies and making life-or-death decisions. His tall, broad-shouldered frame exuded strength, and his piercing gaze scanned the area with precision. Officers who had been barking orders moments earlier suddenly fell silent, their eyes darting nervously toward him. They recognized the name, General Thompson, but seeing him in person was something else entirely. As Marcus approached the patrol car where Maya sat handcuffed, his heart ached for his daughter. He could see the exhaustion etched into her face, the streaks of tears drying on her cheeks. Despite everything she'd endured that night, her posture remained defiant, a trait she undoubtedly inherited from him. When their eyes met through the window, relief washed over her, followed by a fresh wave of emotion. For Marcus, it was a moment of pure resolve. Whoever these officers were, they had crossed a line and there would be consequences. Tapping firmly on the window, Marcus caught Maya's attention. She managed a weak smile, though her voice trembled when she whispered, "Dad." Without hesitation, Marcus turned to the officers standing nearby. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his deep voice cutting through the noise like a knife. The sheer force of his tone silenced everyone within earshot. The two officers shifted, uncomfortably exchanging uneasy glances. One of them, clearly the more senior of the pair, cleared his throat and attempted to explain. "Sir, we pulled her over for swerving and suspected illegal activity. She refused to comply with our requests." Marcus cut him off sharply, his expression hardening. "Refused to comply? Or exercised her constitutional rights?" He took a step closer, towering over the officer. "You harassed my daughter. You treated her like a criminal without cause. And now you'll answer to me." The younger officer visibly paled, his hands trembling slightly as he fumbled with his notepad. He glanced at his partner, silently pleading for guidance, but the older officer seemed frozen in place. Both men knew they were in over their heads. General Marcus Thompson wasn't just any retired soldier. He was a living legend whose reputation struck fear even in the highest echelons of power. To them, he was untouchable. And yet here he was, standing mere feet away, demanding accountability. Behind Marcus, his old friend, the sheriff's deputy, stepped forward, adding weight to the confrontation. "These officers are under investigation," the deputy announced loudly, ensuring the surrounding crowd heard every word. "They'll be taken into custody pending further review." The declaration sent shockwaves through the gathering. Reporters scrambled to capture footage of the officers being led away, their faces flushed with embarrassment and fear. As the officers disappeared into a patrol car, the crowd erupted. Some cheered, applauding Marcus for stepping in, while others shouted accusations at the departing officers. Signs reading "Justice for Maya" and "No more police brutality" appeared seemingly out of nowhere, held high by supporters who had joined the growing protest. Social media posts about the incident spread like wildfire, drawing national attention to the small Georgia suburb. What had started as a routine traffic stop had become a symbol of resistance against systemic injustice. For Maya, the release of tension was overwhelming. As Marcus knelt beside her, wrapping his arms around her, she finally allowed herself to break down. Tears streamed down her face as she clung to him, feeling the weight of the ordeal lift ever so slightly. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I didn't want to bother you." Marcus shook his head firmly, pulling back just enough to look her in the eye. "You never bother me, Maya. You're my daughter. My family. No one gets to treat you this way, not on my watch." His words were simple but filled with unwavering conviction. Maya nodded, drawing strength from his reassurance. Elijah, who had been watching anxiously from the sidelines, ran to them as soon as he saw his mom freed. Throwing his arms around both of them, he buried his face in Marcus's shoulder, sobbing quietly. The three of them formed a tight circle, a fortress of love and resilience amidst the chaos. For Elijah, seeing his grandpa take charge was nothing short of awe-inspiring. In that moment, Marcus wasn't just a grandfather, he was a superhero who had swooped in to save the day. As the initial frenzy began to settle, Marcus turned his focus to the bigger picture. This wasn't just about Maya or their family, it was about sending a message. He addressed the reporters gathered nearby, his voice steady and authoritative. "What happened here tonight is unacceptable," he said, his words carrying weight. "No one should be treated this way, regardless of their background or circumstances. We need accountability, transparency, and reform. Enough is enough." His statement resonated deeply, earning nods of agreement from those listening. Cameras flashed as journalists jotted down notes, eager to share his words with the world. Marcus's testimony wasn't just about seeking justice for Maya. It was a call to action, a demand for change that echoed far beyond the confines of that quiet suburban neighborhood. Later that evening, as the crowds dispersed and the news crews packed up their equipment, Marcus drove Maya and Elijah home. The house felt different somehow, quieter, but also safer. Maya sank onto the couch, exhausted but relieved, while Elijah curled up beside her, unwilling to let her out of his sight. Marcus busied himself making tea, his movements deliberate and calming. Sitting together in the dimly lit living room, the three of them talked about what had happened. Maya recounted the events of the traffic stop, her voice steady despite the lingering trauma. Elijah listened intently, his young mind processing the gravity of the situation. Marcus listened too, nodding occasionally but mostly staying silent, allowing Maya to express herself fully. When she finished speaking, Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Maya, I know you're strong," he said gently, "but you don't have to face things like this alone. You've got me, and you've got Elijah. We're a team." Maya smiled faintly, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "I know, Dad, and I can't thank you enough for coming tonight. I don't know what I would have done without you." Marcus returned her smile, his expression softening. "You're my daughter. There's nothing I wouldn't do for you." As the night wore on, the house grew quiet once more. Outside, the streets were calm, but inside, a new sense of purpose had taken root. Marcus knew the fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot, but for now they were safe, together and ready to face whatever came next. The days following the incident were a whirlwind of activity, both for Maya and her father, General Marcus Thompson. News of the traffic stop and the dramatic intervention by one of the most respected figures in military history spread like wildfire across the nation. Social media platforms lit up with hashtags like Justice for Maya and Accountability Now, turning what had started as a local story into a national conversation about police misconduct and racial profiling. Reporters camped outside Maya's modest home, hoping to catch a glimpse of her or an interview with Marcus. Neighbors who had once exchanged polite hellos now stopped by with offers of support, their faces filled with concern and admiration. For Maya, the attention was overwhelming. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight and found herself struggling to balance her desire for privacy with the growing public interest in her story. Every knock at the door, every phone call, brought a fresh wave of anxiety, but Marcus remained steadfast by her side, guiding her through the chaos with the same calm authority he'd displayed during the confrontation with the officers. He fielded calls from journalists, coordinated with lawyers, and even arranged meetings with civil rights advocates who wanted to amplify Maya's voice. One afternoon, as Maya sat at the kitchen table sipping tea, she glanced at her father, who was pacing near the window, deep in thought. "Dad," she said softly, breaking the silence, "do you think this is too much? All this attention?" Marcus paused, turning to face her. His expression softened as he pulled out a chair and sat down beside her. "It's a lot. I know," he admitted, his tone gentle but firm. "But sometimes, Maya, when something wrong happens, it's not just about fixing it for yourself. It's about making sure it doesn't happen to someone else." Maya nodded slowly, considering his words. She had always been fiercely independent, determined to handle life's challenges on her own. But this situation was different. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about standing up for others who might not have the resources or support to fight back. Still, the weight of that responsibility felt heavy. Meanwhile, the investigation into the two officers involved in the traffic stop gained momentum. Evidence poured in, including dashcam footage, witness statements, and the viral videos recorded by bystanders. The clips showed the escalating tension between Maya and the officers, highlighting their aggressive behavior and thinly veiled prejudice. Public outrage grew louder, with protests erupting in cities across the country. Signs reading "End Police Brutality" and "Stand with Maya Johnson" became common sights at rallies, where speakers invoked Marcus's name as a symbol of justice and accountability. Behind the scenes, Marcus worked tirelessly to ensure the investigation was thorough and transparent. Leveraging his extensive network of contacts, he reached out to former colleagues in law enforcement, politicians, and legal experts. One of his closest friends, a retired judge known for his integrity, agreed to oversee the proceedings, ensuring there would be no bias or cover-ups. Marcus also collaborated with civil rights organizations, using his influence to push for systemic reforms within local police departments. As the trial date approached, Maya prepared to testify. The idea of facing her accusers in court terrified her, but she knew it was necessary, not just for herself but for Elijah, who deserved to grow up in a world where fairness and equality weren't just ideals, but realities. Marcus accompanied her to every prep session, sitting quietly in the corner while attorneys coached her on how to remain composed under cross-examination. Afterward, they would drive home together, talking about anything except the case. Elijah's latest school project, Marcus's plans for retirement, or the cookies Maya promised to bake once things settled down. On the day of the trial, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Journalists packed the benches, cameras clicking as spectators filed in. Maya entered with Marcus by her side, her head held high despite the nerves coursing through her veins. When she took the stand, her voice trembled at first, but as she recounted the events of that fateful night, her strength returned. She spoke clearly and confidently, painting a vivid picture of the fear and frustration she'd felt during the traffic stop. Her testimony resonated deeply, earning nods of approval from those in attendance. Marcus, too, took the stand, delivering a powerful statement that left no room for misinterpretation. "My daughter did nothing wrong," he began, his voice steady and commanding. "She was targeted because of the color of her skin and the audacity to assert her rights. This isn't just about one bad decision by two officers, it's about a pattern of behavior that needs to end. Accountability starts here, today." His words struck a chord, not only with the jury but also with the wider audience watching the trial unfold on live television. By the time closing arguments concluded, it was clear that the verdict would carry significant implications far beyond the courtroom walls. When the guilty verdicts were announced, both officers convicted of misconduct, racial profiling, and abuse of power, the reaction was immediate and visceral. Cheers erupted inside the courtroom, while celebrations broke out in communities nationwide. For many, the outcome represented a rare victory against institutional injustice, proof that change was possible if people stood together. In the weeks that followed, Maya found herself thrust into the role of advocate. Invitations poured in from organizations eager to hear her speak about her experience and its broader implications. At first she hesitated, unsure if she was ready to step into such a visible position. But with Marcus's encouragement and Elijah's unwavering pride, she decided to embrace the opportunity. Together they launched a foundation aimed at providing legal resources and mentorship to marginalized communities, ensuring that others wouldn't have to face similar struggles alone. For Marcus, seeing his daughter transform trauma into purpose filled him with immense pride. Though he preferred to stay out of the limelight, he continued to offer guidance and support, mentoring young veterans and speaking at events focused on leadership and resilience. His reputation as a fearless defender of justice only grew stronger, inspiring countless individuals to stand up for what was right. Back at home, life began to settle into a new rhythm. The constant media attention gradually subsided, replaced by a renewed sense of normalcy. Maya returned to work, though she now balanced her shifts with advocacy efforts. Elijah, ever the source of light in their lives, resumed his playful antics, often teasing his grandpa about becoming a real-life superhero. Marcus chuckled at the nickname, though secretly he didn't mind it. One evening, as the three of them sat on the porch watching the sunset, Maya turned to her father with a grateful smile. "Dad, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. For me, for Elijah, for all of us." Marcus reached over, placing a hand on hers. "You don't need to thank me, Maya. You're my family. Protecting you is what I live for." He paused, glancing at Elijah, who was busy chasing fireflies in the yard. And besides, he added with a wink, you've taught me a thing or two about courage along the way. As darkness fell and the stars began to twinkle above, the trio sat in comfortable silence, basking in the knowledge that they had faced adversity together and emerged stronger than ever. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would tackle them as a team, united by love, resilience, and an unshakable belief in justice. Months had passed since the trial, and life for Maya, Elijah, and General Marcus Thompson began to settle into a new rhythm. The scars of that fateful night still lingered. Maya sometimes woke up in a cold sweat, reliving the tension of the traffic stop, but they were healing. Slowly but surely, the family found ways to move forward, drawing strength from each other and the lessons learned along the way. The foundation Maya and Marcus launched quickly gained traction, becoming a beacon of hope for countless families across the country. Named Stand Together, it focused on providing legal resources, mentorship programs, and educational workshops to marginalized communities. Maya poured her heart into the project, traveling to speak at conferences and schools, sharing her story with anyone willing to listen. Her message was simple yet powerful. No one should have to face injustice alone, and change begins when people stand together. Elijah, too, played a role in the foundation's success. Though only 7 years old, he became its unofficial mascot, charming audiences with his bright smile and infectious optimism. At events, he often stood beside his mom or grandpa, holding their hands tightly as they addressed crowds. When asked what he wanted to be when he grew up, Elijah proudly declared, "A superhero like Grandpa." His words brought laughter and applause, but they also underscored the deeper truth of the family's mission. Standing up for others was a form of heroism worth striving for. For Marcus, retirement took on a new meaning. While he had initially planned to spend his golden years fishing and enjoying quiet mornings with coffee, he discovered a renewed sense of purpose through the foundation. He mentored young veterans transitioning back to civilian life, offering guidance and support based on his decades of experience. Many of them looked up to him not just as a military legend, but as a compassionate leader who understood their struggles firsthand. Through these interactions, Marcus realized that his legacy extended far beyond the battlefield. It lived on in the lives he touched every day. As the months went by, the impact of their advocacy work rippled outward. Lawmakers cited Maya's case when drafting bills aimed at increasing police accountability and reforming training protocols. Community leaders organized town hall meetings to discuss systemic issues, inviting Maya and Marcus to share their insights. Even the officers involved in the traffic stop, now serving sentences for their misconduct, became examples used in ethics seminars for law enforcement agencies nationwide. It was a sobering reminder that actions carried consequences and that justice demanded vigilance. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Maya decided to host a small gathering at her home to celebrate the foundation's progress. Friends, neighbors, and supporters filled her backyard, mingling over plates of homemade food and lemonade. Children ran around playing tag, while adults engaged in lively conversations about everything from local politics to favorite recipes. The atmosphere was warm and welcoming, a testament to the community Maya had worked so hard to build. Marcus stood near the grill, flipping burgers with surprising skill. Despite his imposing presence, he had a knack for putting people at ease. A group of guests gathered around him, listening intently as he recounted stories from his military days. Not the dramatic battles or covert missions, but the moments of camaraderie and humanity that defined his career. His laughter echoed across the yard, blending seamlessly with the sounds of joy surrounding him. Maya watched from a distance, marveling at how much had changed in such a short time. She remembered the fear and frustration of that night, the feeling of helplessness as she sat handcuffed in the patrol car. But she also remembered the moment her father arrived, the way his presence instantly shifted the dynamic. Now, standing in her own backyard surrounded by loved ones, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for her dad, for Elijah, and for the resilience that had carried her through even the darkest times. "Mom," Elijah called out, running toward her with a mischievous grin. In his hands, he held a plate piled high with cookies. Grandpa said I could eat as many as I want. Maya raised an eyebrow, pretending to scold him. Did he now? Well, we'll see about that. She glanced over at Marcus, who shrugged innocently, though his eyes twinkled with amusement. For all his discipline and authority, he couldn't resist spoiling his grandson. As the day wore on, the celebration continued, punctuated by laughter, music, and heartfelt conversations. Toward evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the yard, Marcus called everyone to gather around. Holding a glass of lemonade aloft, he cleared his throat, drawing the crowd's attention. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today, he began, his voice resonating with warmth and sincerity. This foundation wouldn't exist without your support or without my daughter's courage and determination. He turned to Maya, smiling proudly. Maya has taught me that true strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up, no matter how hard it gets. And Elijah? He paused, looking down at his grandson, who beamed up at him. Well, Elijah reminds us all why we fight. For a better future. The crowd erupted into applause, cheering as Maya wiped away a tear. When the noise subsided, she stepped forward, her voice steady and heartfelt. We started this foundation because we believe in the power of community, she said. No one should have to face injustice alone. Together, we can create a world where everyone feels safe, valued, and heard. Thank you for believing in us, and for helping make that vision a reality. By the time the gathering ended, the stars were out in full force, twinkling like tiny lanterns against the velvet sky. As Maya tucked Elijah into bed later that night, she reflected on how far they'd come. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had brought them closer than ever before. They had faced adversity head-on, leaning on each other for strength and emerging stronger for it. In the living room, Marcus sat quietly, gazing out the window at the peaceful neighborhood bathed in moonlight. He thought about the challenges ahead, the ongoing fight for justice, the need for continued reform, but he also thought about the victories they'd already achieved. Maya's bravery, Elijah's innocence, and the unwavering support of their community reminded him that hope was a powerful force, and as long as they stood together, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. When Maya joined him a few minutes later, carrying 2 steaming mugs of tea, she smiled softly. You okay, Dad? Marcus nodded, accepting the mug gratefully. Just thinking, he replied, his tone thoughtful, about how proud I am of you, of all of us. Maya sat down beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. We couldn't have done it without you, she said simply. You're our rock. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, savoring the quiet companionship. Outside, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked lazily. Life wasn't perfect, but in that moment, it felt pretty close, as the clock ticked past midnight. Maya returned to her bedroom, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. He glanced at a framed photo on the mantel, a picture of him, Maya, and Elijah taken during the Foundation's launch event. Their smiles radiated happiness, a stark contrast to the pain they'd endured months earlier. Marcus allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction, knowing that their story was far from over. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, as a family, as advocates and as survivors, and with that thought he turned off the lights, ready to embrace whatever tomorrow might bring.